Hello everybody and welcome back to Learning and Understanding Blueprints. If you remember on the last episode we made the magic box, you'll see this one here is slightly twisted, but when we hit play, because of the event begin play, it then twisted. It is now squared up with the level. And you'll also remember that I called blueprints containers. They hold things like your static meshes, your code, your point lights, and remember that all the components that are in the container have details. We use the code to adjust those details to make the components do things. You'll also remember I ended the episode by basically saying, how can these containers communicate with each other? You can't see inside either one of them, and neither one of them knows what the other can do, so how do they communicate? Well, let's use another metaphor. Let's take a house. A house is a form of container, and it's filled with components, things like furniture, TV, dishes, and it has events inside of it, like chores. Let's think of a situation where the dad does the dishes, the mom cooks the food, and the kid has to take out the trash. All these chores are events and things that need to be done. But of course, if you're the neighbor of that house, you have no idea what the inside looks like, what chores are being done, or who does them. But luckily, on every single house, there's something that lets us communicate with each other. The mailbox. So if we have two blueprints or containers, believe it or not, we can set it up so they can send each other mail. So if this container needs this container to do something, it just sends it a message and says, hey, do the thing. Now you might be asking yourself, how can it do that? You just said it doesn't know what's inside the other container or blueprint. Well, if we look at the back of the envelope, it says the word generic, which of course doesn't appear on screen, but I promise. Generic. It's not asking for anything specific. It's just saying, hey, I was told to send you this message. And then we program the container or the blueprint to respond to the generic call. Let's get started. No ads, earlier content, ask me questions, and even get a Discord call with me to help with your game. These are all on my Patreon right now. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up the blueprint for the magic box. You'll remember that the event we were using is begin play. I'm gonna go ahead and delete that event and hit save and compile. Now this will never be ran. So whenever I hit play, it stays askew and is no longer squared up with the map. Let's set up a really basic system where if our container, the BP first person character, gets too close to another blueprint, that blueprint responds. And the way we'll do that is if our character gets too close, we'll send the blueprint a message that's like, hey, we're too close, do your thing. Side note, later on, we'll do an actual interact system, but it's a bit too advanced for us right now, so this should work just fine. Let's go ahead and open up our content browser with Control Space and head on over to First Person, Blueprints, BP First Person Character. Once we're inside, you'll see all of the default controls. For now, ignore those, leave them be as they let us move around the map. In fact, let's start by going to the viewport. So you'll notice on the viewport, we are a set of arms on a camera, and then we have a capsule collision for our character's, well, it's collision. Let's go ahead and add another component to the container. Let's do that by typing in the word collision, and we're gonna do a sphere collision. This collision is not gonna be the same as something like the capsule. The capsule in its current state is stopping us from walking through walls and doors and stuff like that, whereas the sphere collision is simply going to look for overlap events. That's a fancy way of just simply saying, hey, I've touched something. I'm gonna name it sphere underscore range check. Then over in its details, because right now it's pretty small, let's increase it to something like 500, which as you'll see is pretty large. So we're gonna take it down maybe just a little bit. Let's do like 300. There we go. So now if we get within 150 units of any blueprints, we will officially be touching it. Let's hit save and compile. Let's head over to the event graph, and because we need the sphere range check, we could pull out and do what we did on the other blueprint and then look through the context of things that we can do with just the sphere range check. But fortunately, there are also events that are pre-built in. If we simply just right-click it and go to add event, here's a ton of events that can fire that are already built in for us. So for example, we could do on component begin overlap. So with on component begin overlap, and then in parentheses we see sphere range check, this is basically saying, hey, when something begins to overlap you, get a bunch of information on it. Things like, what are you overlapping? What's the actor you're overlapping? Okay, so we have the event, but now we need to know what the other actor or blueprint is, and we have to send that, remember, that message, the generic call. So how do we do that? Well, let's start by creating that generic call. I'm gonna save and compile the first person character. I'm gonna go back to my content browser. I'm gonna go into my blueprints and I'm gonna create a new folder. In here, I'm gonna create something called interfaces. I'm gonna open that up, and no, I do not mean like a user interface. This is a different kind. Go ahead and right click in that space and we're gonna go up to blueprints, and there's one called a blueprint interface. Click on it, and I'm going to call this interface underscore interact. This will be not only the mailbox, but the envelope for our system of sending a generic call to another blueprint. Let's go ahead and open it up. The generic call is actually going to be a function, but don't worry about too much what that means right now. For now, just go ahead and rename the function int, so like int function underscore interact. All I mean by that is this is an interface, it's a interface function underscore specifically for interact, and we will hit save and compile. Full transparency, I'm still not fully aware of the naming convention, but that's what I've been doing. Now that the interface is created, we can use it to send a generic message. So now we're going to pull out, and we're actually going to type in the name of the function, not the interface. I know it's a little confusing, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna type in int function, and as you can see, now we have int function interact, the thing we just created within the interface. If I click on that, well, look at that. It's saying, hey, use this envelope to send a message. However, it needs a target. And in this case, well, we know that the thing this is going to be overlapping is another actor, which is just a blueprint or container whose parent is an actor. Again, we're not gonna get too into that. So I'm just gonna take the other actor and put it into the target. So now, anytime we overlap another container or blueprint, it's going to send that message to whatever it overlaps. It doesn't matter who it is, what it is, it's going to give out that message indiscriminately at the moment. So let's go ahead and hit save and compile. However, right now, the magic box isn't really built to be able to handle messages. So it would receive it, but it wouldn't really know what to do with that information. So what we need to do within the magic box is go into our class settings. On the right hand side, you'll see in the details, we can do implemented interfaces. I'm going to add one. And this time we don't type the name of the function, we actually type in the name of the interface, which I made interface underscore interact. I'm gonna hit save and compile. So this is where things get really cool, is now, whenever we send this blueprint a message, specifically from the interface interact, this interface can now receive it and know what to do with it. If we right click and start typing in event specifically, so event int function, well, look at that. Now we have an event that can be called whenever we receive that message. So whenever we get too close to the magic box, it's going to square up with the map. It's going to change that rotation like we programmed it to do previously on the event begin play. So let's hit save and compile and briefly go over this one last time. We have a sphere around us, 150 degrees in every direction. Whenever that sphere overlaps with anything, If it's another actor, it's going to send a generic message. It doesn't know why it's sending it. It doesn't matter. It's just saying, hey, it's happening. Then the magic box goes, oh, because of this event, I know what to do when I receive that message. So I'm gonna move the magic box kind of far away so that way we're not over it by default, and I'm gonna hit play. Now, when I go over this box, watch what happens. It received the message and immediately ran that code. And that is how blueprints communicate. They do it through interfaces. And before someone, well, actually me's me in the comments, yes, there are other ways for blueprints to communicate, but this is probably the most efficient and the one you're gonna be using the most of. Now you can have any blueprint or container talk to each other by just sending generic messages. The reason it's called generic is because, again, it's not calling for anything specific. It's merely sending a message and the box takes it however it wants to take it. Just for clarity's sake, let me show you what a specific call looks like. So instead of a generic call, like you just saw, we're gonna delete, or we're not gonna delete it, but we are going to unplug this onComponent begin overlap. So what we're gonna have to do is every single time this overlaps something, we're gonna have to see if it's the magic box. And in order to do that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna say other actor, we're gonna do cast to magic box, the BP magic box. And then if it is the magic box, what we're gonna have to do is create a custom event, and we're gonna call it specific call. And we'll just plug that in and hit save and compile. And then, because now we know for a fact it's the magic box, we can actually do a specific call. So in this case, it's saying, make sure it's the magic box, and if it is, make sure it's doing the specific call. There is a ton of reasons why this is super inefficient, because now our interact system can only interact with magic boxes, or we're gonna have to cast to every single thing that it could possibly be and then do specific calls to their events in order to interact with them. Just to prove this works, I'll show you. Now that both of these are set up, let's go ahead and hit play. So you'll note that the same thing should happen, and it does. However, if I wanted this to be any other thing besides the magic box, things are gonna get really messy really fast. So let's just delete all that nonsense. And now all we have to do is send, instead of a specific, a generic message to the other actor. The other actor knows what to do with the message whenever it happens. And it doesn't matter what it is, it'll work. I hope you're enjoying this series. If you are, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps more than you could ever imagine. My Patreon is down below if you want to help support me so I can continue to make these. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.